Have you ever heard of a company that didn't just sell things but actually conquered a country? I'm not talking about a hostile takeover in the business world. I mean, with actual armies, taxes, the whole shebang. It sounds like something out of a movie, right? But this really happened in India. The story is just wild, and it all boils down to one simple question.
So how in the world did a private corporation, a bunch of merchants, become the rulers of India? A whole subcontinent? It just doesn't seem possible, does it? To figure this out, we've got to go back to the beginning of this crazy transformation. Okay, so our first chapter is all about this mind-blowing transformation. We're going to look at how a company that was supposed to be just trading spices and cloth ended up becoming a kingmaker, and then, well, the king itself. And you know what's wild? This shift in power happened incredibly fast. I mean, think about it. In the 1600s, the East India Company is just a group of guys with a royal permission slip to trade. But then you fast forward to 1764, and suddenly they have their own private army, an army strong enough to beat the combined forces of three major Indian rulers at the Battle of Buxar. But the real game changer? That happened the very next year. They got something called Diwani. And let me tell you, this was the moment everything changed. Diwani basically means the right to collect taxes from these huge, super wealthy regions, Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. So, all of a sudden, you have a for-profit company acting like a government. They're controlling the money of millions of people. That line between being a trader and a ruler, poof, gone. Now, you can't just have a company take over a huge chunk of a country without anyone noticing. Back in London, Parliament started hearing about this, about the company's insane power, and of course, the crazy amounts of money its employees were making. And yeah, they got very nervous. And why were they so worried? Well, for one, the company's officials were getting ridiculously rich through massive corruption. And their methods? They were ruthless. This rogue company was basically giving Britain a black eye on the world stage. So the government decided it was time to step in and, pull the leash on its own creation. So what was their first big move? They decided to centralize power over in India. They looked at their most profitable area, Bengal, and took its leader, the governor. They basically said, hey, you're getting a promotion and a much bigger, fancier title to go with it. This whole thing got official with the Regulating Act of 1773. So this law created that new super governor job in Bengal, giving him power over the other territories. It also set up a governing council and, this is a big one, a Supreme Court in Calcutta. This was really the first time London tried to tame the company's, let's call it, Wild West style of doing business. But it wasn't enough. The company was still way too powerful. So, about 10 years later, London decided to tighten the leash even more with something called Pitt's India Act. This act really drew a line in the sand. It said, okay, the company's business stuff is separate from its political stuff. A new board of control was set up in London to handle all the political and military decisions. And then came the real kicker, the part that showed what was really going on. For the very first time, the company's lands were officially called British possessions in India. Yep, the mask was officially off. So for decades, you have this really weird situation, a private company ruling a country for a government. It just kept going like that. But then we get to 1857. After 100 years of the company's exploitation and just bad rule, the whole system just blew up. To really get a feel for what was happening, let's try an analogy. Okay, picture this. A bully takes over a whole train. That bully is the East India Company. And for a long, long time, almost a century, he does whatever he wants. He's terrorizing all the passengers, who are the people of India. You've got princes who lost their kingdoms, farmers who lost their land, everyone. But then, one day, a single soldier stands up. He's just had enough. This soldier represents the sepoys, the Indian soldiers in the company's own army. And that single act of standing up, that was the spark. Because suddenly, everyone who had a problem with the bully jumps in. They all start fighting back. And that huge uprising, that was the Great Indian Revolt of 1857. Now, the revolt was eventually put down, and it was done with incredible brutality. But for London, it was a massive wake-up call. They realized this whole experiment, letting a private company run a subcontinent, had failed. I mean, it had failed spectacularly. So the British government's reaction was fast and clear. They passed the Government of India Act of 1858, and with it, they just stripped the East India Company of all its power to rule. Just like that. The age of a corporation acting as a colonial power
was over. So what did this actually change on the ground? Well, pretty much everything. The whole power structure was torn down and built back up. The East India Company, gone. The British Crown was now in charge, directly. The top dog in India was no longer called the Governor-General. He was now the Viceroy, the Queen's personal representative. And back in London, that old Board of Control got replaced by one super powerful cabinet minister, the Secretary of State for India. This was a total government takeover, plain and simple. But, and this is a huge but, the end of the company's rule didn't mean the end of British rule. Not at all. In fact, you could say it was the beginning of a new phase, a more direct and maybe even a more strategic kind of colonialism. The British knew they had to prevent another rebellion, so they came up with a two-part strategy. Think of it as the carrot and the stick. The carrot was this. For the first time ever, they let a few Indians join some advisory councils. Now, it was mostly for show, but it was at least a small nod to needing local input. But then there was the stick, a much more cynical plan that would become infamous as divide and rule. So how did this divide and rule idea become official policy? Through something called the communal electorate. What on earth is that? Well, it basically created separate lanes in politics based on religion. So for some elections, only Muslims could vote for Muslim candidates. Think about what that does. It means if you're a politician, you don't need to win over everyone in your area anymore. You just need to appeal to your own religious group. It was a system that basically baked religious division right into the political DNA. And this policy was such a big deal, so influential, that the guy behind it, Viceroy Lord Minto, ended up with a pretty specific, and definitely controversial, nickname in the history books. So let's wrap this up. The British government stepped in, took power from this out-of-control company, and tried to create a stable system. But in doing that, they introduced policies that split people apart politically based on their religion. So here's the big question. Were they actually building a unified country, or were they planting the seeds for future division? That is the question that would haunt India all the way to its independence.